Hey there, and welcome to the Total Potential Podcast. It's siblings together again. I'm Cole,
And I'm Jake.
and we're super excited today to talk about something that's just really palpable right now, which is the opportunity versus obstacle mindset. And the reason, there's a lot of reasons really for that to be so evident right now because there are obstacles, right? Like jobs right now aren't obstacles. Seeing people you love and care about, there are obstacles. But at the same time, there's massive opportunities. Think about things like related to our environment. Our world is taking a giant deep breath that it's desperately needed. And that's just one example. And so we wanted to just have this conversation, not only because of the timing of it, but because we've experienced this a whole lot in our lives. And at the end of the day, whether something is an obstacle or is an opportunity really is 100% a mindset. So what is your experience of that, like, Jake, in terms of the mindset of seeing something as an obstacle versus an opportunity?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess I've seen this a lot in my life, either from my athletic playing days into, like you said, like into a situation that we're in right now. I think um, there's a certain aspect of just the makeup of who we are as people that, our first response is always going to be like, we want to be comfortable, so like, all right,
Right.
if like right now, for example, like this is a very uncomfortable situation, right? Like, is my job going to be there when this is over? Am I going to get laid off? Is my business going to make it? Whatever the situation is right now, it's super easy to get paralyzed by the fear of the unknown. It
Yeah.
could, which can cripple you in all different areas of your life too. So I think I know for myself that what's really has helped me is that when I feel those feelings of like, don't do that, that's usually like my indicator of like, okay, you better go do that now.
Yeah.
And that's where the opportunity comes. That's always where something awesome happens, whether it's, um, a crucial conversation that you have to have with a loved one or a business partner or something. And you just have that like pit in your stomach, like, oh my gosh, I do not want to have this conversation. Then you go have it and you realize, holy crap, the opportunity that just came from that is either, our business is going to pivot and we're just going to take off in this direction, or man, I didn't even realize that my family member felt that way. And now I can see eye to eye with them or whatever. And then that relationship can grow. So I think that the opportunity that comes from the discomfort of that stuff, it's always far greater than like, the thought of like, okay, well, I'm just not going to say anything, or I'm just going to go do this because it's comfortable. And then typically that road leads to a lot of anxiety and a lot of feeling of like, I wish I could do that. Oh, I don't have the courage to do it. So now I feel poorly about myself. And then that snowball can get really big, really fast, So,
Really big. Yeah.
so I think there's something super powerful in just leaning into the discomfort of that's where the opportunity comes.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because and using that like gut feeling, like when I have uh just become more physically aware of how my body responds when I'm getting to the right obstacle, if that makes sense. Like I'm getting close enough to the thing that's so uncomfortable that it's the right thing, that I have a very like total body experience. Like gut is like clenched, like, oh, that makes me feel something. But then at the same time, my heart, it doesn't feel like heavy. It feels like on fire.
Yeah.
And whether or not, and it's totally irrelevant of what that thing is in front of me. Sometimes it's like things like you mentioned, like a uncomfortable conversation. It's like, man, if I just have that conversation, this thing that's been holding me back, whether it's my own emotion or my own feeling or my own interpretation of the situation, like that whole thing could disappear if I just go and have this conversation. and then there's that opportunity. And so
Yeah.
I rely on that physical sense a lot to be my guide of what should I step closer to that is uncomfortable, but it's the right thing because it offers an opportunity to grow. It offers an opportunity to actually be myself in a situation that maybe I don't show all of my true colors. I mean, there's just so many opportunities. And then that's just like me personally. That isn't even taking that into like how you mentioned with the business realm or, you know, how you operate in your career. I mean, there's just so many avenues where you just step close enough to the obstacle, all of a sudden you're like, huh, that looks really different this close up instead of from way back where I was holding myself and then it felt like, I better not do that. Like so scary.
Yeah. Well, and to your point of, being genuine to yourself too, I think that for a huge part of my life, for sure, it was probably a combination of others' approval plus a little bit of ego or a lot of ego on my side of, oh my gosh, if I go down this road and it winds up blowing up in my face and I fail, what are other people going to think? And how am I personally going to be able to take the shot on my ego of failing? And I think when you have that mindset, that's where that opportunity passes you by, right? And you get it in your head of like, okay, well, these aren't opportunities; these are distractions, or these are whatever.
Right.
Until you realize, which is, speaking personally from my life, is when you finally figure out that it doesn't really matter what most people think, and
that they're not actually thinking about you at all.
exactly. And if you fail doing something, the opportunity there is, okay, well, I did fail, but now I can see why I did fail, and now I can take the information that I gained and I can go a different avenue of my life, or I can go down that same road of what I was trying to accomplish, and I can make one turn one way and it's going to work,
Right.
So I think for me personally, that is the big thing of the uniqueness of like being totally dialed in and working on myself so that I could be 100% willing to go down those roads, even knowing that some of them are going to end in a car accident. It's like, it just, what it is. Like, who cares? It's part of this whole human experience.
Right. Jake, the thing that I thought of as you were talking about that was that ego structure and how wildly powerful it is. And our egos, it's easy to say, like, I would like to kill my ego because it pulls me to all these things. But we actually need our egos because, I mean, to be a human, you need an ego because otherwise I'm not Cole and you're not Jake, right?
Yeah.
Like to have this human existence, we need our ego. So we don't want our ego to die. But we definitely, again, I'll speak for myself, like I needed to become way more aware of where my ego was taking me because it was our ego is just so desirous and it desires attention. It desires affirmation. It desires comfort, like too much. And how that pulls at us so much. And it might help us skip some obstacles that are uncomfortable and maybe not necessary. But for the most part, we need to wake up to our egos. And again, I'll speak for myself. Once I woke up to the fact that, like, wow, my ego is constantly telling me this story of who I am, how I should live, how I should operate in the world, just so that I can be comfortable. Like, how boring is that? Like, I don't want to be comfortable. I want to get uncomfortable as often as possible because that's the only place that we can grow. It's the only opportunity for growth. I mean, in this relatively comfortable westernized world, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for growth, lots of places in the world. But in terms of the type of life we live in this society, we have to walk right next to that discomfort to even move an inch.
Yeah. And we have to create it. I mean, I think that's the big thing is you know, we are fortunate to live in a country where we're safe for the most part, and um, you know, it is what it is. We have to create that discomfort. And I think, you know, what was a really cool experience for myself is when I did that marathon last year. Um, when I originally started off on the journey, even though I was telling myself that the reason I wanted to do this was to raise money for a couple different veteran charities, and I wanted to help people and do all this stuff, the obstacle that I was facing at the first part of my preparation for that run was it was more of an ego thing, right? It was more of like, oh man, when I get done with this 10-mile run, I'm going to get to do an Instagram post and put, you know, I ran 10 miles in a weight vest. Look at me. I'm better than everybody. I mean, even though that isn't what I was intending to do, there
Right.
was a piece of that in my mind that was going on. And until I became aware of that, I was having really bad runs. I was having a really hard time visualizing, seeing this thing through and actually doing it. And then when I became very clear on the fact that, holy crap, my ego is really tricking me here of like, this is all about you and not about others. The second that I shifted that, and then that's where the opportunity came, right? Of like, wow, actually the fact of the matter is this could be inspiring to other people. We're going to raise a bunch of money that might save somebody's life, you know? So instead of having that dialogue in my mind when I was running of like, you know, social media or whatever, it was like when things would get hard, then I could think, hey, this could help somebody else, and bam, and all of a sudden there's this huge shot of adrenaline, and I could keep going.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like a small shift, but it that's where all of the obstacle in that thing for me was taken away because I shifted the focus off of my own ego and shifted it on to what it was actually supposed to be about.
Yeah. Talk a little bit, Jake, about what your experience was like, and I'm actually really interested to hear this because I don't know this part of that experience for you. For anyone who doesn't know, Jake ran the Twin Cities Marathon this past fall in 2019 to raise money for a couple of military charities, and he wore a 20-pound weighted vest because that's how Jake likes to do things, go the hard way or no way. Um, but tell me a little bit about what it was like to like sit in the discomfort of that, because I mean I saw your body as you were going through the training, like you were, that vest ripped you to shreds.
Yeah,
You have legs that are shaped in a way that no runners should ever be shaped. Like your body isn't really meant for running, so I can only imagine the types of discomfort that you felt. But how did the discomfort shape the experience?
I think I think for me, um, it actually is what made it rewarding. And that might sound a little bit weird, and maybe it sounds like, man, you know, seeking out pain or whatever. But I think uh, you know, since I've been done playing hockey and kind of just in some areas for a while, I was just kind of waffling through life, not really knowing what I wanted to do or wasn't really applying myself or whatever. And you know, this event for me was a good um, I don't know if you want to call it like a it kind of set the stage for as far as like where I am right now and then what I'm actually capable of doing.
Mm.
Uh, and it wasn't physical, it was the mental. You know, I always thought that everything from playing sports to, you know, running, working out, doing all this stuff, I always thought it was physical. But what the marathon showed me and what the pain threshold and what you're actually willing to endure, there's no physical about that. You know, it's all in the mind. And so that event for me was that's where the opportunity came from, and what I was able to take out of it for my own personal life was, all right, like training my mind is so important. You know,
Yeah.
literally every single day of my life I have to spend at least 20 to 30 minutes of training my mind,
Yeah.
putting a scenario in my mind of how my day is going to go, so that then I have a plan and I have a way to, visualize what I want to be like 30 days from now, 10 years from now, when I'm lying on my deathbed someday, like putting those thoughts in my mind so that then you can endure that discomfort of some of those obstacles and look at them as opportunity,
Right.
The marathon just solidified that for me because there were so many days. I mean, literally, I think in an event like that, you look at the 26.2 miles of the actual day of the race and you're like, oh, what a great accomplishment. But what you don't put into consideration is that the accomplishment is actually waking up every single morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and doing that for months and months and months and logging over 400 plus miles with that weight vest on. That the preparation for me, that was what I wish I could have gotten a medal around my neck for.
Yeah.
Never taking a day off, never giving up, never, even after a totally shitty Saturday run where you're supposed to run 14 miles and got 11 miles in and mind blew up on you. And all of a sudden you're walking the last 2 miles and your mind's telling you how stupid you are and you're an idiot and you're a failure and all this stuff. And then you wake up the next morning and you do it again.
Yeah, totally.
So I think for like the pain part of it or the enduring part of it, it was more of just the mental strength and how important the mind really is to just the overall success of our lives.
Yeah. What about Jake? And I don't mean to put you on the spot with this question, but what about, because I obviously saw you after the race. And I'm not sure if you were having this experience during the training or not, but at least after the marathon, you seem to be in quite a bit of like emotional discomfort.
Yeah.
Were you experiencing that before, like during the training, or was that more of a one-time experience throughout that?
Never felt it one time in training. I think the difference was that day was like that like signified that like that journey or that chapter was done.
Yeah.
And that all of that work. And I think like when you're in the training, there's always another day. There's always the next day. There's always the next challenge. There's always, so it was kind of like a second of like, wow, that was really cool. I'm glad I did it, but it's over. Holy crap. That 4 months of like everything being about that one thing, it's over.
Yeah.
And I think some of that emotion was just like gratitude too, of like the accomplishment and feeling good about the money that we raised, and again shifting that priority to other people. And
you also had a lot of people who came out to support you, and that seems impactful to you. Yeah,
big time. I think that was what was on the emotional side of it. That was what was really getting me. It was just that this was something that and I think we forget to mention more that our cousin also did the same thing.
Yes. Dan Taylor, he's an Army veteran. He's an amazing guy, total badass. Ran the marathon with Jake.
Yeah, with a weight vest, did all of the miles. I want to make sure he gets credit for that too. But there was a piece of that too where him and I hadn't really had a ton of relationship up to that, and then all of a sudden we were just like totally forged together. Of like, not only are we family, but now we're doing this thing together, and we're going to get through it together. And probably the worst part of the whole thing was mile 16, 17 of the race when Dan's calves cramped up super bad and he had to stop.
Yeah.
That was the worst part about it, because that was the first time in the whole 4 months that I was alone and he was alone.
Yeah. To finish it out. Yeah.
And that's where it got really shitty. Really, really shitty. The whole time I'm thinking like, is he okay? Where's he at? How's he doing? Should I have left him? Should I still be back there with him? There's all those thoughts running through your mind too. So I know that it was a really cool event. But for the topic of what we're talking about today, I think it's just the misery, it shedded so much light on like what we actually can endure to get to where we want to go.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lessons in terms of the opportunity of that. I mean, the obstacle is obvious. The training was grueling. Your body was, you know, barking every second for months. But the opportunity was to embrace the struggle,
Yeah.
show up and do the training, show your kids what it's like to, you know, stick to something that you said you were going to do, even when it got super hard.
Yeah.
And then on the end of that, you know, the opportunity is like, well, wow, I did that and I'm still here. And so now what's the next challenge, or what's the
Yeah.
next thing I'm going to take on? The thing I would like to highlight is that it's really easy to take on those physical challenges. And I would really encourage anyone listening to consider other types of challenge that you might want to take on. Because for some of us, like putting on a weight vest and running every day, that's a lot easier than sitting down with a family member and having like a really uncomfortable conversation.
Well, that's what I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I was actually going to say. For me, for this year, for 2020, my crucible event is the emotional
Yeah.
side of my life, because there are things, and you and I have talked about this many times. If you told me to just, run out my back door right now and keep running until you tell you to stop, or I'm going to shoot you in the head, I would just keep going until I, like that doesn't really make me that nervous.
Yeah.
But then maybe having to go and talk to somebody that I know I have to talk to, and I know I've had to talk to them for years and years and years, all of a sudden I'm just like paralyzed by fear.
Yeah.
So for me, for 2020, that my crucible event, I have a list of the people that I have to have these major conversations with. And, I have a time frame for those, and I know when I want to do them. And instead of last year where it was like these physical events throughout the year, this year it's these emotional events. And I'm super excited to see what that brings at the end of this year.
Yeah. What the opportunity of meeting that obstacle looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Another,
I think you're right on with that. It's not only physical feats that are like, you know, I think somebody like me, you can overcompensate with the physical.
yeah, I think there's definitely people, and I don't want to like characterize men as any particular thing, but I think for a lot of guys, they would put their body through the grinder before they would say, like, I'm feeling some way about something.
Yeah.
So I mean, the obstacle for every person is going to look different, and just being honest with ourselves about what that actually is. Like for me, the physical is more challenging. I'm pretty like emotionally in touch. I don't have that much problem saying things to people that might be uncomfortable. Like that to me is easier, whereas the physical stuff is harder. And so I have to challenge myself more and find more obstacles to overcome, um, so that I can have more breakthroughs, but that they translate all into each other, right? Like for you, you might find actually that once you've handled some of these emotional things that are holding you down, that all of a sudden your aches and pains that have bothered you in certain workouts, they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, these things are like, we treat ourselves like we're like these compartments of things, but it's not true. Like we are, they all roll together into a ball of who we are. And so we have to
Yeah.
be really honest with ourselves about, well, what kind of an obstacle actually is hard for me?
Well, and what's funny about that is I was having a conversation with a friend of mine months ago, actually really kind of close to the time frame after I got done running the race. And he asked me, his question was basically like, hey, you do all these crazy workouts. Like, how do you do them? And my response to him was, I go to a really dark place and I just sit in that until it's over. And what he said back to me was, why do you do that? And that right there, that conversation was like the indication for me of like, I have some development to do in other areas of my life, because he was so right. Like, why would you decide to get through a challenging event by tacking on more challenge.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Where in my mind I was thinking like, well, yeah, but I have this place I can go to in my mind to get through these physical events. But then, you start to really find these people that do these really, really crazy physical feats, and they talk about smiling and positive mantras and doing all of this stuff in their mind where it's like they're tricking themselves that they're having fun.
Right.
Where I was tricking myself that I was in this miserable place and I enjoyed it. And, it was like a life-changing conversation from the standpoint of like, okay, well, the physical, even though I will still work out and I'll still keep myself physically fit, the emotional is going to be the challenge for them.
Yeah. Well, and that goes, that is kind of wraps a nice bow on the original point, which is that our mind is in charge of the experience.
Big time.
All mindset.
Yeah.
Both of us have experienced challenges that are very real. Like there's no mindset about it in terms of like, is this real? Is this the reality of my life? Like, wrap your body in a cast and like, that's kind of hard. That's going to be tough. But the thing, I think another aspect of seeing these obstacles versus opportunities is that for many of them, we're only going to see them in hindsight.
Yeah.
And it may be like grind and get through it, like when it is the obstacle. But then when you come to the other side of that hurdle, there's a lot of wisdom there that doesn't change the challenge, but it sheds new light on how and why we experience, the things that we do.
Yeah.
And something, Jake, I think there's a couple aspects that I'd really like to talk about just because of the nature of the work that we do. We've talked a lot about ourselves and how we use this mindset in our personal development. But I also think, and I think you're finding this to be true right now too, is, we're in the middle of this worldwide pandemic. It's a massive obstacle on every level of life. But I'm finding that one of the huge opportunities is to come through an obstacle in partnership with my husband.
Yeah.
Like the first couple weeks, we were having two very different experiences. I just hugged the middle of the road a little bit more at baseline. And I also, I don't have a quote unquote job that I go to and things are happening there. So I was having a different experience. And I also am a total homebody. Like, tell me to stay home. Okay, fine. I have no problem doing that. But my husband's not like that at all. So it started out, we were having these two really different experiences. And after, I felt like that kind of like irritation build up of like, oh, why can't he just like see this in a different way? And then I had to like kick myself in the buns and just say, it's okay that he's not having the same experience that I am. And why can't I just like show up for him in that experience? Like what he's experiencing to him is very real.
Yeah.
And now, we're 7-8 weeks. I don't even know what we're at into the quarantine, stay at home life. And I mean, we've been together almost 20 years and I feel like we're closer than ever.
For sure.
Because we are on the same page and we are getting through this together.
Well, and you said it perfectly. I think that's like the major opportunity or the epiphany that we've had on this side too, of like my way or my wife's way. That doesn't mean that that's the way.
Right.
That's the way for me, or that might be the way for her. And the cool thing about marriage is it's like it's that dance of like figuring out how you blend those two together to work for both people. You know? And then to bring that energy into the kids so that they feel that mom and dad are united and that there's that real strong positive like top down kind of feeling of like, things on the leadership standpoint of our family are really dialed in. And then the kids just feel that. And it's almost like they're in the wake and they just get pulled along, you know?
Yeah, I love that analogy. Yeah.
And that's what I found has been so cool about this thing is that when you're forced to have everything else stripped out of your life and they basically say, go sit at your house with your family, you know, there is going to be some of that discomfort of like, man, we're just sitting here and like, we really have to actually get to know each other, you know?
Sure.
And like you said, if you've been with somebody for 20 years or like my wife and I have been together for, 15 years, you're totally different people than you were when you met each other.
Yeah.
But through the course of having kids and having jobs and doing all this stuff, all of those distractions, they don't allow you to connect like you did when you were dating either.
Right. Yeah. Life is life.
So what we found is like just that's kind of like step back and slow down. It's like we get to meet each other again. We get to learn things that we maybe hadn't talked about for a long time or whatever it is. And then I think the big opportunity that we're finding with our family is we actually get to sit down and say like, what kind of life do we actually want to live?
Totally.
What is important to us? Is big houses and cool cars and lots of debt? Like, is that really what we want? Or do we want to live in the country? Do we want to live in a neighborhood? I mean, just whatever the conversation is, and that's going to be different for every family. But
Yeah.
it's really cool to have them and say like, okay, like when we come out of this thing, we're coming out of it with a plan of like, this is what we in our minds view as our ideal life,
Yeah.
and then you hit the ground running and it's like, it's almost like you reverse engineer it back to like, all right, this is how we want to live. This is what we need to do that. So now on a daily basis, we're just on that path,
Yeah.
happen this year. It might not happen for 5 years, but now we have a target,
Right. Yeah. You're walking toward it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
without this kind of pause on life, that can might have got kicked down the road again.
Yeah. And I think another important lesson in that same vein, and you said it without saying this specifically, is just like the overall need to simplify so that you can see the opportunities. And that's personally, together, as a family, in your work. I mean, that is a like universal principle because our mind inherently makes things more complex. And so, and then our ego says, oh yeah, that's how we work. Let's go get it. Let's be busier. Let's have the next distraction. Let's keep moving. And that has been something that I have valued so much during this time, is just like everything is wildly simple. Like we have probably played 200 games of Yahtzee. And is that like how I want to spend the next 20 years? No, like my time with Yahtzee will be complete after quarantine. But just like we aren't, I mean, we travel all the time. We're not doing that right now. We fill Saturdays going bowling, and then we go to the park, and then we go here, and then we do this. And we're not doing any of that right now. And it's really helping us see with more clear eyes, like the difference between doing things we enjoy and looking for distraction.
Yeah. And why do you do those things, like that? I think what's been really cool too is like just the concept of like that critical thinking of like, okay, because I think it's really easy, and this has been like a major opportunity for my family and for myself of like, this might be the first time in my life where I've actually thought about like, why do I live this way?
Absolutely.
Is it because this is what's been ingrained in my mind of like, this is what you're supposed to do? Or is this the story that I've made up for myself? And I think it's a blend, right? I think there are some things you choose, and I think there are some things that you've just allowed other people or other influences to kind of make those decisions for you. And what's been awesome is really thinking about that of like, well, no, actually what you probably should do is you should probably absorb the information that you get from all these exterior things and then break them decision for yourself.
Yeah.
you know, and formulating a educated decision on how you actually truly believe, you know.
Yeah.
um and that's been like such a cool opportunity of like, man, that, you know, that actually is, you know, like maybe I don't have to like go down this path of like I do this and then the next phase of life is this, and oh, now I'm married, now you better have kids, now you better be a manager, now you better get another promotion, and you better have X amount of dollars in your 401k, and you better boom 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 boom, right?
Yeah.
This list of like these expectations, it's like don't allow those to be put on you if that's not what you want.
Yeah. Or, I
There's
think
something cool
so,
there.
yeah, and so many of those things become a mask. They
Hmm.
don't belong to us at all, but we wear them everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And that's a process that I've really been digging into like extensively the last probably 5 years of okay, like I'm supposed to wear the label of I'm a doctor's wife. Like when I say those words, that means something to people,
Yeah.
except for that it means nothing to me. Like I cannot tell you one assumption that I have based on wearing that label.
Yeah.
But that's just one example. Like mother, father, your whatever your job is. Like every single one of those becomes a mask unless it is absolutely true to who you are.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, the opportunity to just say, I I every day promise to show up as a mother, a wife, and somebody who loves God. Like to me, those are the commitments that I've made to
Yeah.
myself. That those are the masks, the identities, the cloaks that I'm willing and wanting to wear because they feel like they actually are true to the core of who I am. And everything else is up for grabs. Like I'm not committing to any other label, any other assumption, any other anything except for
Yeah.
those three things
Yeah. And those are three things that you chose for yourself.
that
You know,
I chose for myself. Yeah,
they weren't put on you, or they weren't or maybe not even put on you, but they weren't things that you just thought you were supposed to do.
right. There's no expectation
Yeah.
because I'm not meeting anyone else's expectations. I'm literally in those three things only meeting my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mentioned that earlier, like others' approval, that was like a huge thing for me for literally until probably 2, 3 years ago in my life, where it was just like I would change who I was for different groups of people, and I had all these different things. And it's because I was in that mentality. Somebody's going to tell me what to do, and then I'm going to go do it. I'm just
Yeah.
going to keep doing that until, whatever. And, finally breaking free from those shackles was like, whoa.
Yeah. Changes the game.
When your view goes from like having blinders on to all of a sudden they're taking off, and it's like you see the whole world. It's like, holy crap, I can actually go do this if I want, and I could go do this, and whatever path you go down, as long as your personal health is good, and you're going to be of some type of service to somebody else, that's an awesome path.
Right.
So it's like it doesn't matter, and like you said, nobody else cares.
No one else cares. Absolutely.
Everybody else is looking right down at their feet, like right in front of them. This is
Yeah, totally.
what to do to improve my life, or this is what I'm trying to do, or fortunately for a lot of us, most people are stuck in their own obstacle mindset, right? Of like, I got all this bad shit and everything's going wrong and da 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 da. But nobody cares.
Yeah. Jake, you just mentioned something that I really wanted to touch on, which is that, I think for the vast majority of people who have families, I actually don't think this holds true for everyone, but I think for the vast majority of people who have families, they have them because they wanted them. But the really interesting dynamic that I've seen unfold a lot, especially like in some more of the self-development type communities, is that whether you want a family or not, or wanted a family or not, now you have one. And that family for a lot of people ends up becoming an obstacle to their own personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two things that I think are really critical, which is that number one, seeing the family as an obstacle or an opportunity for growth is purely between your ears. That only happens in your mind. So every decision related to whether or not your family is an obstacle to being the best version of who you are literally only exists in your mind. Unless, of course, you are in like an abusive relationship or some extenuating circumstance. But for the vast majority of us, that is a completely mental exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is that, you know, when we take on family life, there are parts of it that can be uncomfortable because there are, you know, there's time challenges. Like you have 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in a house. Like there's going to be a time crunch on everybody. There's time obstacles. There's, when you have really little kids, there's limitations to how much time you really have to yourself. But the opportunity within that to like grow together instead of just worrying about growing as an individual, it kind of takes a couple of the points that we've talked about, which is, you know, the mindset of it all. And the other part of like taking your eyes off yourself. Like the opportunity that lives in that is insane.
Yeah. And I think I was talking to somebody the other day, and I thought it was an awesome description of the family, especially the parenting side, is taking like the word like parenting's hard, and instead of hard being a negative word, in your mind, it's a positive word, right? Like most things good are hard. Most things that provide reward in your life, they require work. You know?
Yeah, otherwise, what's even the point?
Yeah, and parenting or your your relationship with your husband or wife, like if you're not putting in the work, then it would be an obstacle. You know? But instead of feeling like hard work is the obstacle, that's actually the opportunity. I think that's where the shift in the mind comes of like, yeah, raising kids can be very hard, right? They're kids. They're gonna have tantrums. They're gonna scream and yell at their brothers and sisters. They're gonna do things that you're looking at them like, person, even a human being. You know? But that's the opportunity. Those are the moments where we're supposed to use the knowledge of being on this earth for, 30 plus years to say, hey, maybe try to think through this way. Or, I don't want to tell you what to do because I want you to be an individual and I want you to figure this stuff out. But I'm here to guide you through some of this hard stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that can be challenging and that could weigh on your patience, and that, there might be moments of weakness where you make a bad decision. But how hard is it to go to your kid and say, hey, you know what, last night when I yelled at you, I just want to apologize. I'm so sorry for doing that. But at the end of the day, Dad is a human and I'm going to make mistakes. And the only thing that I can do is apologize for you for that mistake and tell you that I'll try my hardest not to do it again.
Yeah. Right.
It's hard to do as a parent, right? Because now all of a sudden your ego comes back in.
Yep.
And you're like, I'm the dad. I yelled at my son.
I know.
Make him so tough. He's going to be so tough because I screamed and yelled at him.
Yeah.
No, he's going to be tough because I came in and was vulnerable with him and said, dude, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Totally screwed up. I don't want you to think that that's what being a man is.
Right. Right.
That's freaking hard to do.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding and it's an opportunity for growth for the parent,
And for the kid, because it helps them see a whole different path. I mean, the amount of things our kids absorb from us is unreal. Like Will, our middle son, came down the other day. We were sitting at breakfast. I just asked him how he had slept the night before, and he said, "Oh, I slept great. I did my breathing before I went to bed." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I did my breathing." I'm like, "What's your breathing, dude?" And he has this whole little routine that he's made up of this breath pattern he does before he goes to bed every night. And I never told him to do that. All he knows is that I use breath to help calm me, and I use it every day. And he sees me when if he wakes up while I'm doing my breath practice, and he hears me say what the ratios are or whatever. Like, but I've never once told him, like, hey, you should really be doing this. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of things our kids absorb just from watching our actions. So, like the example you just gave of just showing up and saying, hey, I messed up. Like, I'm going to work hard to not do that again. I mean, that opens a whole new path of how they get to be in the world.
And I feel like the opportunity, right, in like this whole thing with like health and wellness and like, right, there's no such thing as like the perfect, like being a perfect human, right?
No.
Flawed. That's just a part of but that's the cool part, right? Of like working out, having your life's mission be like when it's all said and done and I'm laying on my deathbed, if people resonated with me in this way, right? And then I worked and worked and worked to get to this point and knew that I was never going to get there. That's the awesome part about it, you know? So denying the fact that we aren't, that we are flawed, it's so silly. And that's where that obstacle comes in of the ego and is like, okay, you can't go have that conversation with your wife or your husband or your kid or your friend, right? Because I can't show that person that I was wrong.
Right.
Well, yeah, but you were wrong. So, so go say you're sorry.
Right.
I'm going to try with everything in my power to not do that again. But the chances are it might,
Yeah.
and I'm going to show up again that time and I'm going to say sorry again. And I'm genuinely going to mean it. And I'm genuinely going to try and I'm going to do my best and I'm going to make mistakes. But that's sweet. That's awesome. Right.
Yeah.
The family dynamic, that's where it's really cool. And I think that's where I've seen the most growth inside my family of like, hey, it's totally cool to be who you are.
Yeah.
It's not cool to hurt other people and it's not cool to do terrible things. But like for my son, Jax, like, I don't want him to be me when he grows up. I want him to be him.
Right. Absolutely.
And same thing with my wife. Like, she doesn't want our daughter to be her. She wants her to be her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like our job as parents is to kind of keep the bumpers on the lane, make sure that like the moral compass is there and that they have values and that you instill something in them, a foundation. So then when they're an adult, then they can say, okay, I do resonate with what mom and dad said here. I do resonate with what they said here. Right. But then they can make the decision with a solid base.
Yeah.
They don't have to figure out all this stuff by themselves, but you don't want to make them into a robot.
Right.
Or
And think
so much crap in their head that then when they're an adult, they have to spend hours of therapy, have all this screen done,
Yeah, no, one of my greatest hopes for my kids is that they get to an adulthood and recognize themselves.
Yeah.
Like that they actually know who they are because they were given an opportunity to cultivate that now instead of when they're older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my point to that whole thing is like there's no perfection isn't it isn't part of this human experience. I just truly feel that way. I think our flaws are really, they're actually like positive characteristics of who we are individually,
Yeah. And their opportunities for growth.
And their opportunities. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no negative kind of, you take all these negative words, flaws, hard, all these things, and you just tweak them to serve you instead of, be things that hold you down.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Which just goes back to that mindset piece and to lean into this discomfort of what the work might be.
Yeah.
Because the best of who we are is inside of there.
I think if anybody listening to this had anything to take from what we talked about, and we kind of did a big loop around, started at the mindset and ended with it. But I think is if you truly dedicate yourself to that, to just working on your own mindset, visualization, contemplation, that future self, kind of like, this is who I'm striving to be, and if you just work on that every single day, and then when an opportunity in your life comes up where you maybe handled it wrong or whatever, then you put that into that work of like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to reprocess through that event and see how I could have played it out differently, so that when it does happen again, now you've prepared yourself in your mind for that to happen.
Yeah.
You go out and you do a better job,
Well, because your mind has a different map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They always told us when we were playing hockey is like, it's a game of mistakes. Don't make the same mistake that your teammate made, and it's the same as this. It's like, when you make a mistake, learn from it, process it, so that when you're in that situation again, you've been there a million times in your mind at that point, and then you go and you rock it, and then there's an opportunity for some other crazy thing that might happen where you handle it poorly, and you're like, oh, cool, all right, now next time, boom, 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 I'll work through it this way. Awesome.
Yeah. I was recently, and you know this, but recently at an Unbeatable Mind event in California, and they just like to lay obstacles on the table and see how you're going to handle them, which is really awesome, actually. But one of the obstacles, and the reason I'm saying this is because of how you were talking about replaying it in your mind. One of the obstacles was getting in an ice bath and then holding your breath underwater for 10 seconds, which honestly, I was kind of like, I've been in ice baths before. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. I didn't even think twice about it. But then I got in the ice bath, and man, putting your head under ice water is not that easy to do. And I just royally failed at this obstacle. But just like you've said, I've already in my mind been in that ice bath 20 times since then. And imagine myself overcoming it, because whatever it is that's holding me back from doing that is some fear that I have not yet identified. So when I get the chance to do that again and do it well and get through the obstacle, the opportunity is going to be whatever was holding me back. Now I'm going to see it. It's going to be right in front of my face. And so even the obstacles that just feel kind of why would you do that? Why did you get in an ice bath? Who cares? Well, because whatever held me back from doing it, that thing is holding me back in other areas, and I just don't see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easy to say every obstacle is an opportunity. And I honestly do believe that, but some obstacles are harder than others, and only hindsight is 2020. We can only look back sometimes and see the really hard things that turned out to be maybe the most important thing that happened in your life. Yeah.
And when you are going through those super hard obstacles, just as best as you can, just lean into it and really try to figure out, and learn from it. And it could be a sustained amount of time. And it's like, man, that year sucked, but holy crap, now I'm on the back end of it. And what I learned through that just pit of my life, now I can use and just go kill it,
Right.
And then what I would say is, when things are going awesome, that's where you have to create those obstacles, maybe workouts get a little bit nastier. Maybe you dig into something that you've been shying away from or whatever. It's like, when it's going really sweet, make sure that, there's the other side of that's coming.
Right.
Just always be in preparation, I guess, is what, I just tell myself all the time, prepare, always prepare,
Yeah.
I heard a perfect thing the other day. It said, we don't rise to the level of our expectation, we fall to the level of our preparation.
Which is 100% true.
And I think that if you have that mindset, and you're just in that kind of that workhorse mentality of I have all of these pillars of my life that I have to work on, and I have to put in the work every day. I have to be preparing, even in good times, so when the bad times comes, I have that resilience to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could probably keep going and going, but I think
Yeah.
that's good for today. It's a hot topic and it leads to a lot of other, we didn't even touch on like resilience and some of the other factors that are related to this, but
Yeah.
appreciate everyone's time listening today, and we will enjoy being back soon. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.
Okay, bye.